Welcome out, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to come listen. I'm excited to get back in the flow of things. Kind of been taking some rest lately, and it's been good. And I'm ready to get back into it. And I'm really excited about today's episode. So we're going to jump straight in, as always. And today's topic might seem familiar at first, but we're going to go a little bit deeper than you probably have in the past. So one of the most important things that I teach on is the topic of healing. Now, we've all been through painful experiences and we've all dealt with heartache. We all carry brokenness and we're all looking for relief from those burdens and from the past. And a lot of times I'll focus on pointing out the destructive patterns and the faulty ideologies that might be keeping you stuck making the same mistakes over and over again. But it's also really important that as you leave those low places, that you also drop the baggage that you've picked up. So just like you walk out of those spots, but you have to release what you've been carrying. Otherwise, you continue to hurt. You continue to live through the lens of that past experience of that pain of the sorrow, the grief, whatever it is that you went through. I want your true self is deeper than that. And I want it to come out. I want you to be able to experience life without the layers of junk that you've accumulated over the years. And see, there's a big difference between having scars and having opened wounds. Now, a scar is a reminder of where you've been. It's a lesson that you've learned that reminds you of what not to do, but it's also the evidence that you're able to survive and overcome the things that you just can't avoid. A scar teaches you that life can be painful, but also that you're strong enough to handle it. The problem is we often think that we have scars when in reality, what we have is actually an open wound. And an open wound is something that's still sensitive. It's something that's still painful. You can expose and you can interact with a scar without causing pain. You can encounter situations similar to the original trauma without excessive distress when your wound is healed. When you go through a bad situation, you can learn from that experience and you can internalize those lessons in a healthy way as long as you heal correctly. And unfortunately, more often than not, we don't heal correctly. What usually ends up happening when we're hurt is we recoil, we tense up and we close ourselves off and we don't want to feel that pain again. So we try and shut that wound off as much as possible. And this is just normal human behavior. Sometimes when things get really bad, all you can do is shut down and just kind of trudge through it. I talked about that a while back in the Terminator approach to suffering. Like sometimes you just got to keep going and like it is what it is. But that can be useful as a last ditch effort, but it's never a good long-term solution. And once the situation's passed, it's definitely not a good place to stay in. A lot of the people that come to me for one-on-one coaching are the ones who've been through really horrible things and they have given up on traditional therapy because it's just not working. And it's impossible to go through life covered in open wounds without that pain influencing how you interact with the rest of the world. You'll be sensitive and you'll be fearful. You'll have a hard time dealing with normal everyday situations. They're going to remind you of those past experiences. You're going to be on edge. You're going to be numb. You're going to be detached from the world, disassociated, easily overwhelmed. Your strongest emotions are going to be things like pain, depression that seems to come from nowhere, anxiety that seems to come from everywhere. Your heart's going to become hardened and filled with bitterness. You'll start saying horrible things about yourself, like, no one will ever love me and I can't trust anyone. I'll always be alone and this is just the way I am. Let me tell you something. That's not just the way you are. That's the way you've learned to be because you went through something bad and you didn't know how to handle it. You've encountered evil in the world and you have internalized negative responses to protect a broken heart, but that hasn't healed the wound. You may have put up walls and hidden the injuries behind a curtain of apathy, maybe bravado, maybe superficial comfort. Maybe you found some relief in giving up and accepting defeat because it seems easier to believe that you'll never heal than to risk exposing those wounds again to the possibility of further agitation. And I see a whole society of people who are so closely identified with their pain, with their trauma, with their brokenness, that it's become the water that they swim in. It's become the air that they breathe and the light by which they see. It's become such an accepted part of their reality that they struggle to even conceptualize a life without those chains weighing them down. They've become so fully encapsulated and just they so fully embrace those prison bars that they're terrified to even imagine the possibility of freedom because there's that nagging fear in the back of their mind. If I try to heal and it doesn't work out, the disappointment might just crush me. So instead, they live their lives overwhelmed by all sorts of psychological issues and unconscious patterns that dominate their thinking and make them vulnerable to the impulses of their unconscious mind, the influence of the darkest impulses that we have, really. And they say that's just who they are. But you begin to see that their lives are defined by symptoms of brokenness. Things like anxiety, depression, PTSD, addiction, self harm, dysmorphia, rage, codependency, feelings of worthlessness, rejection, hopelessness, burnout, fear of abandonment, overwhelming shame, guilt and confusion, oppressive loneliness, an obsession with sex, numbness, the inability to experience love or to form meaningful connections with other people, performance based relationships, self hatred, and emptiness. And I don't care who you are or what you've been through, you're not meant to live that way. You're not meant to live life through the lens of defeat. God did not weave your DNA together with a desire for you to live a life of bondage to the worst that this world has to offer. And those things do not define who you are. They are simply the intersection between genuine adversity and ineffective coping strategies. The idea that you're stuck with these things is a lie, and I refuse to let you fall for it. The society says this, oh, yeah, that's just the way you are. You're not going to heal. People tell you this because they haven't figured out how to heal. I don't care what you heard on the news. Not every corner of the world is on fire. I don't care what the therapist told you. It's not going to take 10 years and six figures just to tell you to go take drugs about it. And most importantly, I don't care what destructive things you've said to yourself in the mirror or in the car or in the darkness of your bedroom. It's not the end of the road, and you are not stuck. You are not hopeless. You are not beyond repair. You are not unlovable. You are not unfixable, and you are not doomed to repeat the same patterns over and over and over again if you choose not to. Now, the road to healing might be long. It might be difficult, but there is a road nonetheless. There's an abundant life waiting for you on the other side of a willingness to expose your wounds and start cleaning out that road rash. That life is one with an open heart that's full of joy, and it's freed from the shackles of systematic abuse and psychological warfare, the stuff that plagues our society all day, every day. The reason that you feel like you'll never be healed is not because you're hopeless, but because you have embraced the injury as your identity. You've internalized the pain as your personality, and you've confused the wounds with your worth and accepted past failure as your future. And the first step to recovery isn't to meditate with your journal and your colorful rocks while listening to weird music. It's not to take power walks while drinking a smoothie or taking cold showers at 4 a.m. Imagine that this large building collapses on you with you inside. Like you see these movies like the firefighters pulling people out, or medical shows where they've got to like figure out how to save somebody that's been trapped, under the rubble for a while, and they've lost circulation, stuff like that. So you're pinned down. There's an earthquake or a fire or something, some kind of structural issue, and you're trapped under a beam, like a big, just something that holds you down, and you're surrounded by rubble on every side. And it might not seem like there's much hope for you to escape. But after a while, you can't just lay there and take the pressure of the beam weighing down on you anymore. So you start struggling, you start pushing as hard as you can. You twist around, you squirm, you try pushing off with your feet, you try pulling with your hands, you try moving in every direction until you finally find an angle that gives you just enough room to maneuver. Finally, you find a gap and you manage to scramble out from under the beam. Now that you're free to move around, you can start finding a way to escape from the rest of the rubble. You can start finding a way to get out from that building where before you were trapped. Now you have an opportunity to escape. And I want you to start seeing your mental and your emotional state in the same way. No matter who you are, you're looking at the world through a certain lens, and that lens is probably causing you a lot of pain. I've noticed times when I was looking at a good example of this one, I was looking at the lake and I got depressed, right? Like I kind of irritated, like, really? I can't look at the water without getting depressed. This is stupid. Because somehow my mind went to a place where I remembered being somewhere else, being in a certain place with certain people, thinking that I had a certain future, feeling a certain way. And suddenly I was so fixated on how all that stuff is gone. Now I'm all alone. Now I don't know what's next. Now I don't feel so good about my life or about my directions, right? And it really took me by surprise to realize that my perceptions were so distorted that I couldn't even enjoy nature without getting depressed, without getting into my feelings. And maybe depression is not the thing that gets you, but you understand what I'm saying here. Just looking at the water was triggering memories and bringing up pain. And I started to notice it everywhere. Be driving and just random houses would cause nostalgia, or the sunset would make me feel lonely. Getting coffee would wear me out. Watching random people would, it would take me to that dark place just all day long. And I had been feeling those things and hadn't noticed them. And that's what's crazy is that it's unconscious. You get stuck in your head and it's like you're walking around. It's like, oh, I'm anxious about something. I'm depressed about something. I'm lonely. And I feel bad. I feel trapped some way. And you don't even notice it because those bars are invisible. Because the things that are being triggered, they go under the level of your conscious awareness. And so noticing these reactions, noticing these things that I was drowning in all day long was like suddenly realizing that I was trapped under that beam. Like you wake up, you're concussed, like I don't know where I'm at. What even happened? Did the building collapse? And it's like, oh, wait a second, I've got something weighing down on me. And most of what goes on in your head is unconscious. So you can be super fixated on really negative things and extremely unproductive patterns and be completely unaware of it. And I don't know what the thing is that's keeping you trapped, but I do know that until you're able to shift out from underneath that, it's going to distort the way you see and feel about every other aspect of your life. When you're depressed, everything just adds weight to your soul. When you're anxious, you can't enjoy anything because there's fear around every corner. When you're bitter, every stone conceals a new reason to be angry. When you're grieving, everything reminds you of loss. If you're confused, the world would be more than happy to keep piling onto that. Whatever it is that gets you, it's so important to become aware of the lens that you're using to view life because until you do, everything's just going to look a certain way and you're going to be completely oblivious to the possibility of change. Until you understand what filters your unconscious is using, you'll feel like no matter what you do, it'll just be the same thing in a different place. You'll think that you can get the new job, but still have the same anxiety. You'll think that you'll get the relationship or the reconciliation and still be depressed. You'll recover, but you'll still be bitter for time lost. So there's no point in moving forward. There's no point in doing anything. So water that you swim in, I want you to be free from those things. Those are not just mental processes. They are burdens on your heart. They don't just affect your brain, they weigh you down spiritually. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The way you feel about and perceive life is a direct reflection of the internal state of your heart. You might like to pretend that things aren't all that bad, but you just can't make a dying vine produce good fruit. If you don't protect your heart from contamination, your life will become diseased. If you don't curate the content that you consume, it will not be long before it starts to consume you. If you don't choose to stop making excuses and start walking away from TV, music, social media, and people that have a toxic effect in your life, it will not be long before your mind is polluted and your thinking is distorted and the world's negative messaging is embedded in your distressed heart. And I'm blown away by how much time depressed people spend listening to music that only makes things worse. They listen to songs about being sad, songs about breakups, about offing yourself, about drug use, about wrestling with dark thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, it's not all that bad. The people in Hollywood who openly worship the devil and write music about how they want to use each other for sex, abuse drugs, and have no higher aspiration than temporary fame, the recognition of fickle-minded, shallow, empty relationships, and build material possessions and physical appearance. Yeah, nothing weird being programmed into you there at all. Sure. No, they have your best intentions at heart. They're not out to glorify themselves and, you know, express the darkness in their own hearts. You ever think about that when you listen to like distressing stuff, like art, quote unquote, where it's negative, it's angry. It's depressing, it's sick, it's twisted, it's messed up. People are like, well, I'm expressing something. It's like, well, I don't want to fill my brain with things that you're expressing that you really should be like working through in a healthy way. And you're feeding these things. You're throwing fuel on them. You're putting a magnifying glass over them and blowing them out of proportion. You shouldn't be expressing them. You should be praying about them. You shouldn't be expressing them. You should be healing them. Expression is not healing. Like, yes, you have to expose the wounds and clean out the road rash, but to use it as a creative source is not healthy, because then when you get tapped out, all you're doing is you're digging further and further into that open wound. And so when it runs dry, like you want more of it. It's like, well, I want to make carpet again. Right. And you're just exacerbating it. You're not allowing it to heal. That's a mistake I see a lot of people, especially a lot of artists make, is they think that they have to express their negative emotions. I have to express my rage. I have to express my depravity, my sexuality, my fear, my depression, my whatever it is. It's like, no, you don't. Like, you need to shift your focus off of those things. You need to fill your mind with things that are going to empower you, things that are going to fill you with life, things that are going to fill you with abundance, with joy. You don't want to keep throwing fuel on that fire, right? And how about social media? Oh, I don't understand why I'm anxious. I must need medication. Meanwhile, screen time says I'm spending 4 to 6 hours a day on social media, comparing myself to other people who have the benefit of carefully curating the exact impression that they want to make. They've got the lighting, they can change the perspective, they can edit out imperfections. That applies to both physical appearance. It also applies to lifestyle. They can show you exactly what they want, exactly what they want you to see, and nothing more. Just like how a movie set can look like a mansion in Los Angeles when it's really a warehouse in Atlanta. Oh, Atlanta. No, I'm just kidding. Influencers can pretend that their life is amazing when really they can't be alone for a single day, because when it's just them and their thoughts, the demons come out to play and they realize that all that money, all that attention, all that spirituality can't fix what's fundamentally broken inside of them, no matter how they try to fill that void. But meanwhile, you don't see that. So you feel like no matter how hard you work, it's never enough. I have to keep competing. I have to keep striving. There are always so many people doing so much better. And it seems like you'll never be enough. But your heart is sensitive. You can't poison it and then be surprised when the fruit it produces is toxic. I think of the world system like a snake. It's either choking you and preventing you from getting a breath of fresh air by crushing your lungs with worry and distraction and things like that, or it's poisoning you. And that poison looks like harmful ideas that you pick up that just won't seem to leave. Someone says you're not smart enough. A voice in your head says you'll never get picked first. You'll never be wanted. Some influencer who got cheated on in high school and then started a whole podcast around how you can't trust anyone. You just need to focus on yourself. Yeah, those are toxic ideas. You have to give up the things that are weighing you down and dripping poison into your heart, or you'll only continue to sink. You only continue to be sick. You have to stop drinking the poison, or you're not going to have the strength to wriggle out from underneath the rubble that has you pinned. And I'm here to tell you, once you get out from under all that, life looks very different. Not only can the external things change and be better, but you can change on a fundamental heart level and be a totally different person. Oh, but I don't want to change. I like my personality. I like how the trauma makes me funny. And listen, those jokes, they don't drive a stake deeper and deeper and deeper into my soul every time I tell them and reinforce my negative programming. I said, I'm here to tell you that you can be free from even feeling like you need to be a certain way. You can be free from even feeling like you need to make people laugh, or that you need to laugh away the pain. You can be free from thinking that you have to entertain people for them to value your presence, your company. I'm telling you that you can break out of the shell you've been in so long that you realize most of what you consider to be your personality is nothing more than a trauma response. And the real you is so much brighter, so much more interesting and more fulfilling than whatever quirk or habit you think makes people like you. It's really rare to find people who live with an open and healed heart. And to be that person is to bring a lot of light into the world. It's refreshing to be around. It will make you magnetic, but it's not even about that. It's about not living in bondage to the past. It's about being healed from your brokenness. It's about being freed from the prison of your own mind. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." Make no mistake about it. Whoever you hang around is a pretty good indicator of who you're becoming. This includes social media, it includes TV, it includes music. What you fill your time with and your attention with declares to the world what you will tolerate, and to your unconscious what you will imitate. So stop following the patterns that got you here today. They haven't worked. Start shifting your attention away from how you feel about the world to understanding why you have that interpretation in the first place. It's time to heal. God bless.